Some industry commentators have predicted that peer-to-peer lending platforms will need to evolve into hybrid models to grow, using a mix of peer-to-peer lending and balance sheet lending. We ask our industry experts what they think of both models.
At the moment, we've got quite a distinction between peer-to-peer lending platforms that are operating as a real marketplace and other platforms which are really lending off balance sheet. It's an interesting distinction at the moment, and each of those options comes with its own regulatory hurdles. In some ways, being a P2P lender and operating as an intermediary should mean that the rules are slightly lighter than they would be for lending off balance sheet to some degree. But at the same time, you're undertaking a huge amount of responsibility for the lenders, given the rules as they're currently written. And so essentially a P2P lender is looking after both the borrower, and there's a huge number of protections around the borrower and to do with responsible lending and how you might collect debts. And at the same time, as a P2P platform, you're also looking after lenders' interests too, and dealing with all of the regulatory rules around that in terms of disclosures, being fair about how you might present the various statistics about lending on the platform, the marketing rules. So essentially you're owing duties to both sides of the platform, and in some ways that's almost more difficult, albeit that I would say on the whole balance sheet lenders can, depending on their structure, have a more challenging regulatory environment. The hybrid model is quite interesting. In some ways I think hybrid models are necessary to help firms deal with some of the scale they might need, particularly when it comes to securing some of the most interesting deal flow out there. Being able to lend off balance sheet can be a real advantage in that scenario. Having said that, you could be faced with two sets of regulatory rules and two regimes and all sorts of additional conflicts of interest to be managing if you're running a hybrid model. And so it's a commercial competitive advantage, I would say, but also that comes at the cost of some additional work.
I didn't grow up in finance, I grew up in business, so I'm normally the person asking for money. I only switched from poacher to gamekeeper about 6 years ago, and boy, I can recommend not doing those exams in your 40s. It's not like doing it in your 20s at all. So from my perspective, I'm just a little bit obsessed with alignment. So I like to understand how people are motivated and their fees. So it's not really for me as simple as whether balance sheet lending is good or bad. I just like the transparency, and I like to understand what motivates people, particularly when things go wrong. Less so when things go right, but when things go wrong. So how are fees getting paid from that perspective, and have they got skin in the game? So when I'm speaking to investors, and in our case, a lot of the financial advisors, who, as you can imagine, are maybe a little bit later to the game, some of them, a little bit more skeptical, they're recommending this to someone else, they've got their own regulations to worry about, they're really kicking the tires to understand, how we're going to behave, how this works, how their investors are protected. So in that situation, I'm mostly just trying to explain that we are aligned with investors, because Downing won't get its fees paid, its annual monitoring fees aren't paid unless the investors get their capital back and their interest paid in full. So that's our version of alignment. Can we invest off balance sheet in every bond that we do? No, we can't. We've done 56 million in the first 2 years. We paid back about 22 million of that. For me, the fees is the commitment, because these are now 2-year, 3-year bonds, and I will not get paid my fee unless the investors get their cash back. So balance sheet doesn't work for us per se. It's just about understanding who's senior, who's junior, what gets security, who gets paid back first. And that's one of the challenges of the market, I think, is to really be able to assess the risk in the end entity, the person or the company that's raising the money, the risk in the investment vehicle. Is it equity? Is it debt? Is it secured? Is it unsecured? Is it a loan? Is it a bond? Is it junior? Is it senior? Is it FSCS or is it not? And then what is the platform doing to disclose due diligence and then mitigate that risk on behalf of others? So it's a slightly more complicated answer, I think, than you maybe wanted. Neither is good or bad, but as an investor, I really want to know the platform is in it with me. So really plunkly, if you look at a platform and you're deciding which platform to invest with, ask the question of how they get paid. And if they earn their fees solely from the borrower, are you feeling comfortable that they're aligned with you, or are you feeling comfortable that they're going to look after the borrower first? If they're investing from balance sheet, you might say, right, well, look, they're putting their own money along with me, and that means they must have a bit of confidence in the deal, and that gives them another little tick from my perspective. But do just check on what terms they're investing with you. Are they getting the same rate as you're getting? It's quite hard to really find the transparency on fees, and I think as an industry we could do much, much better in making it really clear which fees apply, because those fees are eating into the potential returns. And I always say, as shorthand, if you can only ask one question of a platform, find out for the particular loan or bond or portfolio you're looking at, find out what the rate is that the borrower is paying on that loan, because that is going to be a better indication of risk than what's offered to you in the platform. If I say to you, this is 5% return, you'll immediately have some conception in your mind of what that risk profile is. But if I told you that the borrower is paying 15, you might have a different perspective on the risk and start to go, really? And where is that 10% going? And who's getting it? So really understand how the platform is paid, when they get their fee, whether they've got their money at risk, are they in it with you? And I just want to know when the shit hits the fan, if and when it goes wrong, however unlikely that is in lending, will they look after me? Are they my agent? Is there a security trustee? Are they waiting to get paid until I get paid?
So my view on hybrid models between having a mix of, say, balance sheet lending and also institutional funding as well as retail funding, I'm actually quite neutral. I think the P2P platform is going to find their niche that they're serving, both on the borrower side as well as on the investor side. I think however we help borrowers get access to finance is always a good thing in the UK. That helps with job growth. And I think any way that we help investors be able to have that middle pillar of investment that complements their portfolio between savings and equity is helping the UK to grow.